Hello there, Roblox fan 75,000 here, an entrepreneur of my content creation, generally innovative. Otherwise known as a Michigan Spartan since mid-2018, and the cool scratch guy since 2017. You'll probably remember things that sparked all around 2022, right? Well, here we are in this recap. As the year of 2023 came around, I'll be explaining the entirety of all the events that happened and with itself revolving all around. I know, this may look like event review regarding this year, but it may look like it summarizes things that may consider this video as a recap. And yes, this is the Ivona's voice that I'm going to be using for recap that may look like the same sound as my voice per usual, but soonly when I get older, my voice will change for just a little. Let's prioritize the 3 chapters on each in this recap. 1 is the main events that happened this year. 2nd will be the unfolded events of me along with my internet experiences, and in real life, and 3rd and last will be my conclusion. And to please note, to reduce witch hunting, and prevent cancel culture, no names for all costs will be mentioned out of confidentiality. Some names I will throw heads up for the importance, and the events mentioned throughout this recap are written in the way that no further contents of backlash ensues. Oh, and one more thing before we start this recap had no intent to nurture any bad memories. What the majority of this says informally is to get it off our chest. The wait is over. Let's begin. In the start of 2022, this is predominantly the most shocking parts, and simultaneously, loose parts of the 2020s through 2022 by itself. More web animators and other internet users had turned into child groomers, predators, manipulators, and other of the all-and-all incriminating mindset. This included Crippled Vampire, Mark P. Romo, James Bear, Talon, Rainbow Kitty 101, worst of all Darren Pipster, aka Darren Nichols, and so on. I get it, most of the recap consists of some grooming incidents, but there's more to it, which I'll be explaining it with my high intelligence. What took place is that there was a tempestuous war of Russian had invaded Ukraine, all because the president of Russia wants to declare and demonstrate the loyalty of special military operation aiming for the demilitarization and denazification of Ukraine, and subsequently that Russia caused the intentionality of cyber-attacking Texas, and according to its telecom regulator announcing fines an Alphabet Incorporated school against YouTube. Until off topic of that, there was a deadly mass shooting in Highland Park, a city in Illinois, during the parade for the 4th of July, and there was a Russian armies took the Ukrainian cities Kiev and Lysychansk. Next it was a potential flood in Kentucky. Wildfire took places into 2 states, New Mexico and California, had destroyed over thousands of homes and several catastrophes on other states. Then there was a death of David Warner, Bob Saget, James Caan, Louis Anderson, Peter Robbins, Ray Liotta, Earl DMX Simmons, Emily Delgado, an actor who plays various Sesame Street's puppets on TV in the old eras, and shockingly the Nehemiah Persoff, who is a voice actor of An American Tail, performed as Mr. Mousewitz, had passed away when he lasted over 100 years, which broke into many childhoods of the various old-school animation and movies. And last but not least is Queen Elizabeth II, the Queen of Britain. Then there's still NFTs, as non-fungible tokens, that continually spread and swarmed all across the internet, and growing in other subjects. Notice that it was a killing a purpose of crypto, but I know it's from last year. Oh, and there's another events that sparked of what I've acknowledged not more than a month ago. Hawaii had become one of the most isolated islands on Earth, mainly because the Mauna Loa's volcano had erupted easily and rapidly, and constantly spewing lava with no end in sight, especially swallowing homes, stores, etc. Considering the fact that the volcano becomes really hard to predict, and finally and a good thing that there was a huge celebration where it took place in World Cup Qatar, that Argentina had won the finale, as they gold much shots than France, but at least France did their best. You know, I think that might be addressing many details regarding the main events that I've acknowledged throughout this year, but if there's anything that you have what's understandable, and more knowledgeable you found from the news, please let me know. May sound like a shorter introductory chapter 1 no, but to make it longer, let's proceed into the next one. As I proceed into the year of 2022, in January, I was convinced that things could be better, unlike last year, accordingly some deeming things that happened to affect the next year, until suddenly a few days later, things had easily and already going downhill. In detail, of the two between my SR friend of mine and the other SR musician got hacked by a targeting crypto and a Russian targeter prior to their YouTube tokens being stolen. One was the hijacking live stream, and second was the Binance Bitcoin scam vids. I don't know why things happen quickly, as hacking is an extremely unlawful offense, and that's something they should get charged for. There has been a Discord statement post regarding it which honestly led to some remarks to that valid point straight until the evidence has resolved. They did a very good job for doing their best. Encouraged to protect the account turned on the two-factor authentication, and it was their opportunity to recover their accounts for security and safety. But we proceedingly don't want to hear the same things may happen in the next day, even though it can and it may not be unseen. Then a week later, more problems began to surround the SR community regarding things from early 2020 which I was involved at the time. I don't know what the problems was in that community, but we'll just have to leave it as it was. Then on January 14th, this is one of the worst family plannings that I've ever had to deal with, and I'm not afraid enough to stay to it. When me and my dad came home from school, he advised me either to my little brother or my mom to cook chicken parmesan for dinner, till subsequently this evening, he hardly banged the dining table right in front of me out of frustration, all because of me slicing too small or too thin where I was supposed to slice them into quarters. And when it was nighttime, we came up the worst family planning to watch the horror movie in R-rated. The idea of having me and my family watching the horror movies can cause the deterioration, where I went outside at the backyard and screamed, and whenever I went back inside, my dad went mad right in front of me and commanded me to get it together, other he'll confiscate everything from me. Due to this BS before in the next day, this is where I began streaming to vent regarding it and to tell this crap out of frustration, as in the matter in fact that my dad was quote-unquote is trying to take things really out of proportion or some, it still has to happen precedingly, and potentially. Then the month after that, this is the another worst ones that I've ever had to endure in real life, and I'm not afraid enough to address. I was at my dad's friend's small house for quite a while as we visit here. My dad was in a call where he needs to sign up to go on a vacation regarding my little brother's hockey tournament. He then gazed into my sketchbook that consists of my furry arts and suggestive contents in it, and even it was private, and no one can do that kind of unnecessary things into my sketchbook. Anyways, he then snatched my sketchbook of privacy and I felt like he's going to expose it, and I swear I need to quickly get it back into me, or even give him the small notebook for him to sign up, until when he confronts me that I was timidly going haywire when he was trying to see what's inside, even though he wants to write a signature or something like that. This is one of the deepest abomination that I've been up into, prior to the fact that he subsequently finds out of what my private arts look like in the sketchbook, and what he's seeing. The one he querying me under pressure and asking me if why I drew that kind of content into two things, fetishism, and lipophilia, despite that my sketches were cartoonist and aesthetically improved with some adroit skills and other learning experiences. However, upon this situation still went into my nerves, and yet I've been forced to decompress and simmer. And I was being so ashamed about how I panic so bad when he tries to see if what's inside of my sketch that consists some of those occasional contents that looks like that, or so on. How can this be possible when I was trying to privatize my arts from having my family seeing it? And then this typical events continue easily around March. In the head of the second day, priorly at night, my family is going to having tacos or burritos for dinner. Ever since it was late Tuesday that we're having meals from fast food instead. Later, I've been warned not to go back into my room after I set the table, and whenever I went into the dining table, I was about this close to be penalized, as if I'm quote-unquote cleaning my derogatory when really, it was literally out of line who should have complied to it. Subsequently a few weeks later, in the approach of spring break when I was trying to make a coffee for my little brother, Ben apparently just scolded me that he needs to do it on his own. Since then, my dad then approached and do the same thing to me at the same time, simultaneously the ones from earlier, and prior to that, this is the second time that I'm making vending streams once again, additionally along with one of my friend in audio, because you know how I've been vulnerably distraught prior to the strict shit who sat down to me. And then while I was in my room before at noon, according of me going along into a people's stream, my dad came into my room, holding a glass beer filled with alcohol and Coca-Cola, and startled me with a goddamn grim look, until he momentarily went away. And that was it. Nowadays, with that said, moving on to Q2 of 2022, around April, I came up with a plan in FA to do an art trade for my new friend associate, right after I met him back in late 2021. I and my newer comrade spent many times together posting them to each other, and so on. I typically posted a few which specifically consist of two characters, the big one laying down on the floor, and the little one lying on the big one's round spot depending on when they're inside, or outside, etc. During this subject, the issues began to erupt spontaneously. I have to witness things that revolve around when the troll with unscrupulous humor had the audacity to overly cyberbully many people out of nonsense, including one of a friend of mine, thereafter circumventing the suspensions from that platform and proceeded the same deeds towards them, including me. Subsequently, we managed to stop this troll from its ongoing misdeeds toward us, because guess what? Barely did anything. However, we are congratulated for doing that honor, as we contacted the safety teams regarding these big inconsistencies caused by the troll, considering the benefit, that we should move on and continue doing other stuff, and so on. Oh, and I forgot who is the main cause of this racket occurrence in FA. It's been a while. It could be a delinquent or something, rather than spreading the crap across the internet. Then approximately a few weeks later, this is one of the most mistaken subsequents that I was involved into. And literally, I was blatantly, likely falsely accused of manufacturing the efforts by exposing the legendary Sparta remixer of 2011 on stream. And the next thing, I'm indeed afraid to say this, that it was a false alarm/hoax, when it priorly causes the backlash had revolved easily due to the fact that I've been a victim of doing the crap of call-out cultural shenanigans, and that's something that it doesn't intend any jokes. With that, I was subsequently and shamefully alleged by a person with a light blue icon of confronting, scolding, and ranting over the main purpose of the case that I was involved to, and prior to that, I was working on the apology letter to the people we've heard with this incident before moving on. I don't know why this situation could get any worse, but if my single question has address in this recap, then I assume that I almost right, cause what happened in the next day is going to boil like hell. The next morning, my Discord account got hacked by the Russian steamers, and prior to the fact that it was much worse than the incidents from yesterday, and I tried my very best to re-secure my Discord account back to normal, right after I immediately got home from school, and thus I barely did it. However, I've prompted to do a public streams in my main YouTube channel and to apologize punctually about this big incident, and everything had worked perfectly, but the next thing you know, you might have been unaware of the fact when the troll during the stream had entered here and tried to call out one of the member from FA and suddenly respawns things that ain't true, due to the fact that I don't even know of what this troll is doing, but I'll just leave as it is. According to the spontaneous cutted streams between him and the call-out shenanigans, it clearly shows that this troll annoyously used the efforts to mind control people in stream regarding it, but to claim that the evidence aren't that justified. To be honest, it could be some jokes or something. Then back into Discord, I was then caught using quote-unquote insights on the public community, and it was sentenced an hour of muting. Then an hour later, I ended up having my tears steaming down my face out of depression, and to endure things in the VC of why would this happen to me, to the fact that I was in the sad music sound of Untitled by Simple Plan, and subsequently, whenever I putted this stuff in the custom status out of people who sentenced me getting muted, I've ended up getting lots of trouble in here and so on, until things were taken care of. May sound like a long explanation that I've addressed around April, cause in any cases, let's proceed into May. There's only one mention in this month that I have to explain to. Same things between me and my dad's conflicts had erupted again, so basically when I get home from school, me and my dad's, especially my little brother, we're discussing the upcoming dinner servants that we're having steaks for tonight's dinner. Subsequently he raised his voice to me as not only that made me feel so derogatory and immature, but made me fuel the temper I started while I was about to progress my chores done depends on if it's Monday, Wednesday and Friday, and whenever I clings the act, my dad yelled back to me to redeem myself not to use it, claiming that every day that I have to understand to comply when this situation commenced. Now I don't even know anything that sparked in May, since there's only one mention that sparked, so let's just move into June. This is one of the monumental days, when I've been working on my Sparta remixes for quite a long time while I was doing other stuff, and so on. And as I got one of my God projects finalized, I was about to premiere it on YouTube to observe how overly amazed I've worked on these visuals principally, as I have a lot of efforts to put these in mind, and suddenly momentarily after the premiere, serious problems begin to fuel like hell. My Discord's community sanctuary got almost entirely and cataclysmically nuked by the anti-targeting groups, right after they entered and asked me to add, which blasted a massive scene, prior to not only the majority of us had to immediately evacuate the community, so don't want to end up getting the entirety of the massive attacks anywhere they go. How crazy did it happen and where that came from? But luckily, everything has been resolved, as we had the opportunity to revive the entirety of all the channels and chats back in the community server, and recreating the roles that they're cleared prior to the overly ravaging nukes, and some insane shit. Since Q3 of 2022 came around, I came up with a new campaign that goes under generally innovative, entertaining identity that features some lo-fi elements, minimalist elements, geometrics, etc. I also did totally 10 item switch that also consists of the stripes, dots, clock, Ferris wheel, speed lines, etc. Now before we get into the middle of July 20th 22, please warn that my blood was boiling hard while facing the outcomes of me among the internet, and in real life, and how they treated me so mentally just because I was even frustrated to things that I was trying to comply while my mental state had fueled out of proportion, the fact that I'll never become the same, that I used to be. Now this is one of the worst predicament I've ever been a victim of, even though that I'm not willing to explain this of what's been happening ever since, but this needs to be addressed, like so. Around July 14th, after we got home from immunizing, the city in Alger country, and as we camped here this summer, my dad becomes more stern towards me while we're cooking sausages for dinner before watching the TV series of Star Trek, as we're in the rush, or might as well think that this is in cooking accelerated program, meaning that we need to comply much more critically than going in gentle mode, as well as the development that may relates to the components of when we're in the rush before the sun goes down. This needs to be established. I felt like our heart was almost dropped into my stomach of what we're doing too seriously, despite in this single occasion. For those of you who are still watching, this is definitely something you're not going to like to hear. It really devastating, controversial, and even going as to appalled you out of all circumstances. Until I got overwhelmingly pissed and clenched my fist severely after my dad aggressively harangued the shit out of me. He willfully gave me a pure dreaded punishment by virtually grounding me, and forcibly taking away my power cord from the monitor and my iPhone, even going as far as to claim that the punishment can escalate a whole new level of severity and grows much the worsening than ever, and potentially whenever I did something wrong, even when I get older, despite it was less misfortunes, I may ended up getting much severities than ever from my dad, full-on threatening much. This definitely goes to show how emotionally and strictly appalling of those punishment is. Considering the fact my dad is about to get charged for a strict and domestic violence which that might also considered, and I swear I should have get out of the house and take myself for a very long time of a walk before coming back, until suddenly he could get charged for it. I even had wishes either for my dad to leave me alone entirely, or even find a new job from the city that abides a code of conduct. My dad shouldn't be at my side if he dares to be virtually and strictly manipulative to the standards is not only my overwhelming frustration or something like that, but I would like to do for the advanced. Then subsequently these things happened much excruciatingly around August 22nd when the ominous scene of I and my family cooking dinner took place when suddenly my dad approached and instructed me to immediately comply the steps on cooking. Then the most straight up dark things that may be shocking, that when my dad threatening to take potential brutal assault against me, when he forced me to decompress during this precarious goddamn predicament, before dinner was ready to served, but still purposely a hostile shit, which this is again fucking antagonizing made me real worse than ever. How would my family ended up taking things out of proportion, as well as putting my life on the line. Oh, and prior to my speech relating the conflicts between me and my family, this is essentially where my family's dire circumstances had left many an unsafe scars around my sentiments. As I said priorly, the drama and the relative crap relating to me and my dad taking place in real life from occasionally in ages, had left many overly scars around my sentiments, that I'll never become the same. Now I don't even know anything that sparked in September, but there's one mention back in my Discord server. Some of the typical problems begin to the topic of things are unnecessarily related to some Jewish types, and if it's satire or whatever it is. Anyways, moving on to Q4. In the head of October, this is where things had kept going into a downward spiral that I spied into, which is the fact that I was also blatantly and heavily accused for manipulating the following two around YouTube Discord that I'm not going to mention any name out of spite, and my anxiety is keeping me for spitting it all out under interrogation. The only thing that I've been doing idiotically is obscurely bringing up the crap out of it, even though you get uncertain to a thing, but I felt so ashamed as I was quote-unquote so much as manipulating his friend of his, during the time whenever I gaze into the brown avian, and I felt like that I also blew things away prior to the evidence between me, and the two of them, till yet I've been forced to go to the DMs. Subsequently, I can't believe I have to say this, where I ended up having a silent reaction prior to the evidence, and technically I ended up getting blacklisted by them, and acknowledging things of how I learned my lesson to leave them in the far distance from me, on how to keep my mouth shut. that I should have do it in the first place, and so, then approximately 16 days after this incident, I was working on the apology letter to the people we heard with these incidents, but apparently, it was too late, despite I barely did anything with it. However, during the time I was alleged by the legal, but negative feedback from the female who warned me never make a statement regarding the evidence because I wanted them to prevail, and if I'm quote-unquote excusing my actions when really, it's obvious when they need to learn not to make the announcement letter relevant, as well as typing words into a long paragraph like an essay. Yeah, some like that. As November approached, I've been experiencing some terrible sampling audio latency issues which came from Reaper, after I updated Windows 11 to version 22H2 that night. The sound of the melodic instrumental music seems to be alright, but prior to the issues relating samples delay or somehow, I was barely able to experience the result of the audio plays into two different phases. One was an original one, and the second had them offset around -4 to 5 milliseconds, or some like that. It's been weeks since I have to endure, but it might be too complicated to try countless ways to find any culprits that affects this issue, as I tweak into the setting, indicating any types of culprits that may causes the audio affection. And no, I assume that it wasn't my sound player. Maybe it can sampling itself, I think, imagining that Windows merely affected Reaper audio sampling when the software revolves around musicalizing. Near a particular time, me and the others went into an argument over to something regarding my cease and desist letter to the followings that happened from October that took place with me reiterating things in numerous times. The typical kid on the other hand had continued the confrontation so easily towards me while that issues end off is not only it can willfully escalate the drama, but led to this typical kid getting kicked off the community if the drama hyper-drained dude who were quote-unquote trying to accuse me in this pure predicament, until the issue was taken care of. Nowadays, when Christmas Eve 2022 reaches out, in December, the same domestic occurrences that compares the conflicts to the ones from mid-July, and that stuff took places where me and my dad went into a heated damn argument all because of me being so dense to find a spot for the cooked bacon to place either on the stove or the center of the dining table, as he suddenly harangued hardly right in front of me again. The fact it was much more excruciating than the ones he did to me from mid-July. And when we're having dinner, as my mom claimed that the steak isn't cooked enough, or she could have advised him to cook it more so it may taste better, his immature behavior and his harangues to just that to her momentarily that it was much worse than what he did to me, that not only that causes my mom went to a basement and having a mental breakdown, it goes to show that my dad causes the Christmas first case of disaster, as my dad had managed to take things really out of proportion, when there's a high degree of misfortune going on, where some of us had problems for some stupid nonsense, or some other things of what it means by that. And lastly, as the year of 2022 comes to a close, I even had the following thoughts. 1. Christmas is a terrible mistake for me to adore after this family's distressing events. 2. I even had wishes the Santa come to give out presents when we've been believing him in ages ago. 3. I have no idea how Christmas 2022 ended up causing the worsening to the fact when I said priorly that my dad used that kind of immature perilous strict manner directly towards us. And if he had alcohol effects on him. 4. The side of the internet. I was unaware of how much that I've witnessed the delinquent troll, for example, that some trolls, has been intentionally and heinously tries to cyberbully people regarding their tragedies, mental illnesses, claiming to things Jewish stuff, making fun of people's death, worst of all people's autism, as well as attempting to exposing their stuff out of nonsense in general, especially being racist towards Jewish people, and so on. And 5. I have no clue of why we've been ending up adoring this ordinary, but literally a miserable Christmas, unlike the moments that I've endured. The entirety of these incidents slipped throughout 2022, because as I tried to get the better of it, I've always fallen to depression and resentment, most particularly because of drama, and my dad occasionally harangued at me prior to my derogatory and badness in general. Who cares if that's what he was, but it still made me so much as sensitive if he do this to me. Thus it can easily took a toll on my mental health, and most importantly he gave me PTSD, and not in the good way. So in conclusion, it turns out that 2022 just gave out much extreme repeat of excruciations than 2020 and 2021. It's heinous, malevolent, horrendous, and one of the most abysmal year that I've endured in my 16 and 17 years of existence, and believe it or not, every single mention throughout this recap had led me worseningly antagonized, along with the people I know, and I'm friends with. I was barely able to find the compromise to do things to these repressive incidents, generally the conflicts of me and my common friends, and most predominantly the scandals between me and my family. Of course, we've been dealing with these inconsistencies many times ago, but it may not cease us from abolishing it. As I said priorly, in the beginning of it, that I have wished from bottom of my heart for the year of 2022 to be brighter than 2020 and 2021, because if we want to make things right, we have the opportunity to make it right, and to act better. But apparently, all these incidents had to slip through here, despite it was less problematic. Until the year comes to the close, the majority of these incidents, especially me of myself, had deteriorated me mentally and physically, and I can't even think straight because of it. I won't expect 2023 could be better, because things that happened last year will most likely affect the next year. Well, that's a wrap for this recap. If you enjoyed it, and understand the conflicts and drama that I go through my experience from the internet, and in real life, then please ensure to hit that like button, and subscribe to my YouTube channel so you won't miss out. To prevent missing out, make sure to hit that bell icon next to the subscribe button so you'll be notified by every video release I put on this channel. Thank you for watching, and I hope you can have a better year of 2023.